So today I'm really excited to be taking a look at this. It's the 1/10 Art Scale Tyrannosaurus Rex from Iron Studios. Originally, Iron Studios offered a huge 1/10 scale diorama that included two jungle explorers, main characters Grant and Malcolm, Timmy and Lex, and came with fence diorama pieces and foliage. It also included working lights, which really added to the effect. Unfortunately for me, the cost was a bit prohibitive and the size was too much for me to actually have on display. It was only when I started building my display space, which I've documented on the channel, links to the videos are down below, that I realised the corner would be the perfect place to display this figure. This was acquired from a great European seller called Figurine Collector. I'll put a link to their shop down below, but being based in Europe, it meant that the shipping was relatively low and they had the product in hand ready to go. So the first thing I want to convey to you in person is the sheer size of this figure. I think even looking at this on camera, it doesn't really capture how big it is. I have large hands and you can see that I can put my hand over probably just the top portion of the Rex's skull, and it's still too large for me to actually put my entire hands round. Just look at this Papo green Rex head fitting inside the jaws of the Rex, and you can really get a sense of how huge this figure is. This is actually 88 centimeters long and actually measures about 44 centimeters tall. And I feel like 1/10 scale is right for this figure, not only in terms of the presence that this thing has, but also in terms of how forgiving it is in terms of sculptural detail and paint. It feels just the right scale for something of this detail and size. If you didn't know already, the pose captured here is actually matching the scene in Jurassic Park when the T-Rex roars at Alan Grant as he lights the flare. And I think that particular moment in Jurassic Park is captured beautifully here, crystallized in 3 dimensions for you to orbit around and observe in minute detail. Starting off with the base, I think functionally this does a very good job. It's very stable, it doesn't feel loose, and both of the feet fit into footprint shapes that house it very nicely and securely. So functionally it does the job very well, and that's the main function of this base. In terms of the aesthetic, I'm not too fussed about this, I have to admit. They've gone for like a dried riverbed effect, and they've actually weathered it with a darker wash, which does bring out the detail. However, I feel like I would have just preferred a very simple geometric base. On the side of the slab of rock that T-Rex is stood on, there's some nice sculpted skeletal detail that appears to be raptor-like, so maybe it's evoking the feeling of the T-Rex overcoming the raptors. And it also reminds me of the slabs on the side of the columns on the interior of the visitors center. Unfortunately, I feel like it hasn't been weathered properly. There seems to have been one sort of jet of an airbrush, and maybe the skeletal area has been wiped away a little bit, but this weathering isn't sufficient to really show up that relief detail, and could probably do with a couple more passes from some darker oil paints that are rubbed away to really bring out all that skeletal detail. At the front of the base you have this really nice gold or brass finished Jurassic Park logo, which is actually very, very nice. They seem to have tried to weather it with some darker paints. I think it just needed a few more weathering passes to really make this logo pop, but I can see what they're going for and I appreciate the brass gold effect. I think arguably the sculpt might be the best feature of this figure, which when combined with the proportion and the anatomy really holds up under scrutiny. Let's take a closer look at that now. Starting off with the head sculpt, you can see lovely fine scaling and creasing going on all over this head sculpt. It's beautiful. Closer look at the teeth. And they've just matched the animatronic teeth set. They just look incredible. Here's a look at the nose and skull from above. Those lovely ridges across the top. And those broader scutes, I believe they're called, combined with the finely packed scales, look really, really nice. The tongue is very nicely sculpted. You can see it's got a very high gloss going on, which brings out all that detail. The high gloss is also visible on these fleshy parts on the corner of the mouth. And I don't know if you can see it, but they've actually painted very fine veins coming in from the edge of the jaw. Inside the mouth you can see the sculptural detail continues. One thing you might not see when it's on display, but I noticed when I was getting it out of the box, is there's actually a seam line inside there between the upper jaw and the rest of the head. I don't know how well you can see it, but the eye actually projects a little bit from the socket. And it has a little bit of a lip just on the inside edge there. I think they may have done this to make the eye more readable from a front-facing position, which seems to work. On the other side this is not so visible, but the detail is amazing. The sculptural detail in the neck is really beautiful, lots of fine scaling, lovely folds going on there. Now as you transition from the neck into the body, you go from a very fine detail piece into more broader and softer details. When you look at the head and it's more detailed, it kind of brings focus to this area, and when the body is a little bit softer, it feels almost a bit like it's out of focus, a bit like they're doing a lens effect in the sculpture itself. It's only when you get close that you notice that disparity in detail. And that softness in the scales and all of the detail and the folds continues all the way down the body into the tail. This has that same level of detail. It also continues down the legs until you get to about the ankles. From the ankles downwards, we're treated to real sculptural detail on these toes and toe claws. This is incredible stuff, and it has to be said that the paint job and the weathering is really complementary here to this sculpt. It really brings out all the detail. And this bump up in detail is also granted to the finger claws, which look really nice. Taking a look at the belly of the beast, really, really nice, crocodilian feeling, true to the T-Rex animatronic. And with this being in such an extreme pose, there's some really lovely creases and folds. And I love the creasing around the arm area here. You read that as kind of like a transition from very high detail to nice and soft and broader scales. Arguably without this satin semi-gloss finish, the paint job wouldn't hold up as well as it does. It's the combination of the paint job and this finish that really bring the Rex to life and make it feel like the original animatronic T-Rex. And there's a beautiful high gloss used on the interior of the mouth that really gives it this genuine wet look versus the more satin finish of the rest of the skin. Bringing in the Chronicle Collectibles Breakout Tyrannosaurus Rex, also reviewed on the channel, link is down below. You can really get a sense of the scale difference between these two models. You can also get a sense of the difference in the fidelity of the sculpt and paint job. Even proportionally, I'd say overall the Art Studios looks far more accurate than the Chronicle Studios Breakout Rex. So all that remains now is to move this statue into its permanent residence in the display space. So that concludes today's review of the 1/10 Art Scale Art Studios Tyrannosaurus Rex figure from Jurassic Park. I think this will be a welcome addition in any Jurassic Park fans collection, but yeah, what an impression and what a conversation piece. Okay guys, as normal, rate, comment and subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm just having some fun placing the Gallimimus maquette, which I've owned for some years, with the 1/10 T-Rex, and I know this isn't meant to be that moment in the film, but boy does that look fun.